Okay.
All set? Cool. All right, roll call. Let's get this thing going. Scott? David?
Yep.
Bob?
Yep.
Mr. Wask? Or Dr. Wask?
Yes.
Which is it? Or is it just Jim?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do Jim. And Sarah?
Carl's here.
You're here? Okay, good. And Jim? Since Dick is not here, guess what? You get to be a voting member this evening. That's cool. All right, first order of business, review these minutes, which were, you want to tell everybody?
They were, based on my notes and my brief thing, it ran through ChatGPT. That's who created these.
Oh, okay.
Just so if there's anything there that you don't like, it's time to say something. But, we did review them anyway, and they,
Make a motion that we accept.
interestingly, they did not come up with a couple of errors, so that's,
I'll second that.
we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That was easy. No public comment tonight, looks like, because there's no public. I had a call from the fellow who was talking about coming to visit with us for a possible modification on the house at 15 Main Street, the one that's for sale, it's right by the river. I told him basically that the planning board doesn't really have a role in identifying what you do with a property once it's a lot size, lot's been determined. We set the rules, but we don't administer the rules, and we don't have any site plan review process here in town. Some other towns do, but we don't have a staff of like 5 or 6 people. And the way our zoning ordinance is set is that the administration and process is owned by the Board of Selectmen and their representatives. And if there's going to be an exception to any administrative decision, that ends up going to the ZBA folks, and that they would be responsible. And I said, based on what he was talking about doing, I had really no comment other than usually the planning board process, and I think it's probably the ZBA's. If you're doing better than what you have, it's probably gonna be something that's reviewed favorably. But it's chicken and egg, and I couldn't speak for the ZBA. And I told him, you really, Kevin's your go-to person, and listen to him. Just listen to understand what his concerns might be, and you have to decide whether or not those are things you can live with, or you're willing to get a variance if necessary. And
When did you have that conversation?
this afternoon.
Okay. What time?
Oh, got about 2 in the afternoon, something like that.
Because I'm not sure exactly what time, but Kevin Clory called me and asked for the Zoom information.
Yeah, he was asking for the Zoom information.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I sent it, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that was after or before you talked to him.
Okay, he was asking me whether the Zoom stuff
Yeah.
was the same
That's
each time, and I said, I have no
what I-
idea, but I said, but it's whatever it was in the e-news for the agenda, and that's a good one, so. But after we talked, he said, yeah,
Okay.
so, no public comment. All right, 225 projects. I think these are just kind of like
Placeholders.
placeholders, because we don't have to talk about each one every time we meet, but we kind of leave them on the agenda just to not forget them. Or totally disregard them, but I don't know that we have anything to talk about on the.
Well, the only thing I wanted to bring up was, if you looked at the agenda for your meeting next Tuesday, that ad hoc forum is on their agenda for Tuesday,
Yes, I saw that.
which I think you're gonna approve to do it. We were thinking last meeting that if sometime in June, we would have some type of parameters, and I don't know if we wanted to talk about that a little bit today, so we can be prepared for our June meeting. Because we were talking about giving some kind of parameters of what we're gonna be looking for, what they can prepare for us to meet with them in September, like right after Labor Day, to the end of the year, and this would give them the summer to kind of get their ducks in line as far as what the purpose is, what was the agenda we wanted to outline and provide to them in June.
Well, that would be welcome. Yeah, I, just speaking for myself, for some sort of parameters to be gone through and somewhat agreed on that go before the board as recommendations, and I don't see any, issue with the current board wanting to do anything other than take those recommendations. At this point, there's a lot of moving parts going on right now around town, and so that strains our bandwidth.
Mhm.
And I'm just being honest. But I think if there are some sound recommendations that go before the board at the next meeting, with a motion and a second and a vote, then we can start in on, recruiting membership from each of those boards, and having it be up to them whether they want to participate, which we hope they would, who they would want to kind of represent their interests on the board. And then it can start to really happen and be clean and ready to roll by third week of June for September work.
Unfortunately, Dick was, it was
Yeah.
Dick's brainchild idea. But, I mean, it was more of like, was it and again, I'm just shooting ideas, was it more of a collective body to kind of put everything, because you say there are a lot of moving parts going on right now, as we just talked about, 3 things going on this weekend. And is that going to be looking at the capital improvement updates, see if that needs to be changed or updated for this year, being prepared for the master plan for next year? Is there any thought that we could have them start thinking this year, so when we go to them, it's not, oh, yeah, the master plan.
Yeah.
And again, I've never been involved in writing one of those, and I'm still trying to read up like what we're supposed to be putting in the master plan.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think if I understood Dick correctly, at least what I heard him say is that it would be nice if we had folks together who would at least talk about priorities and have some sort of roundtable, if you will, where we could at least identify what items are out there that haven't already been identified. And also for the ones that have, and we've started a domino process with the fire station that will obviously play out as you go. We've got what do you do with the old fire station? How is that going to be utilized? What happens with the Gray's Inn garage? What do we do with that? And then, what other 3 or 4 things are sitting on the plate? You've got some things that you have going with the Housing Commission that need to be at least folded into our thinking in terms of whether or not there's any funding that you guys are going to be looking at. We have an initial funding process for it, but I didn't think that was where it was going to end. And then, so when and how much kind of thing, or if, you know, I have no idea what I'm talking about, but, you know, it's like understanding, but that's what I'm talking about. We don't have, right now, some of those things aligned in our head, and the same thing with what we're hearing from the school folks is that, well, we can't tell you what we're doing right now because we haven't focused on it. And again, I think your comment, Bob, around bandwidth is critical for that. Their bandwidth right now is still focused on the high school decision and the contracts with the Conway folks at SAU 9. So they may choose not to participate again for the same reasons and say, "Hey, look, yeah, that's really nice, but." And it might be the right answer for them for right now. So it may be our timing's terrible too. So again, I'm not sure. But I think if you had the discussion, and then you could at least have people talking.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the problem, I think, is that, for example, the way the select board is set up, you can't even talk to one another and have coffee, for crying out loud, without it being a public meeting.
And there are times that's just so wonderful. No, you're right. But at the same time, whether it's a busy school board or a library trustees group or a conservation commission in the middle of major projects or whatever it is, you know, I think this is the right time of the year to put it on boards and committees' radar.
Yep.
And if we can be succinct and clear about what we're going to want to do and the time commitment that anyone on the board could be expected to make, then it gives all those groups a clear understanding. You know, for all we know, there's somebody on one of those on those boards or committees that would just it's right up their alley. You know, and oh my gosh, I could find 2 hours a month. You know, I could find 2 hours a month between the meeting and the work between meetings when they're going to start to convene in September or whatever it is we decide. I mean, being as clear and accurate as we can on the scope of work and the time commitment. And I think we'll be real pleased at the participation we get. That's just, you know, not knowing, but that's how I feel.
All right. So is there something we can do this evening that will help? Or
Well, isn't a lot of that up to the group? I mean, it seems to me that, you know, really what we want is very simple, is we want the various groups in town to coordinate and be kind of in sync. That's sort of the concept, and then to me it's more up to the group itself as to, you know, how often they should meet, you know, how they should structure the meetings, what they should talk about each, you know, what the agenda is each meeting. I mean, I think there's not much we can do in advance of all that.
Other than share our thinking, and if I sounded like super concrete and laying out absolute parameters, then I didn't do a very good job. But you know, I think we have a better idea than they're going to have until we go up and you know, and we don't want to have to flesh this out with each group for half an hour of their valuable meeting time anyway. But just those general thoughts on what we see this group addressing and the advantages of it and the time commitment, I really feel like it would be sometimes the hardest thing, and this speaks just for myself, but starting something like this is the most difficult step for me. So if I've got a head start in the form of some general ideas that give me a much clearer vision on what's going to happen, I can take that and maybe work to tailor it or just understand it and then get a vision on what we're talking about. Whereas if it's just somebody showing up at my meeting and jibba jabba, it's too abstract for me. And I just speak for myself. But
No, I agree. I mean, to me, that's what I was looking for is a framework.
yeah,
Not the details, but the framing of the meeting that says, because I was just thinking, you know, do we go to one of their meetings over the next 2 or 3 months to throw this idea to them so we're not taking up extra time? And I know the first question out of their mouths from me would be, well, what do you expect from me? And I think we have to at least give them something that says, this was the goal, or this is the purpose, and maybe that's what it is. We develop a goal or the purpose, and we say, okay, we're gonna define it once we all meet, but this is the ultimate of what we want to do, and it's an ongoing thing. It's not going to be, we're going to do it this year and we'll never do it again. It should be more of an ongoing
yeah.
kind of
So,
process. Because you're right, there are many things. I read the conservation minutes, and they're looking to take some pieces of the Gray's Garage down. They're getting quotes from somebody to tear off the back something off the Gray's Garage. So, I mean, so there's people doing a variety of things. And moving to Town Hall, there's a plan to move Black Mountain Road in the process of realigning that and getting rid of the triangle there. And we're looking to do a pop-up this fall to actually block part of the road off to see how people react to it. You know, because that's going to be changed. It has to be changed because of the way they're moving the building to allow for parking.
The town of Jackson is forming an ad hoc committee to explore initiatives driven by the master plan and capital improvement plan. The committee will be tasked with evaluating key ideas and concepts that support the town's long-term strategic goals. Its primary objective will be to develop a framework that outlines the potential scope of work, key focus areas, and time commitment expectations for future project planning and implementation. This foundational effort will ensure that town leadership and stakeholders have a clear, organized path forward for aligning resources with community priorities.
Did you just write that?
Thank you, ChatGPT.
I was just gonna say, is that
Oh, really?
sounds good to me.
It's like, wow.
I just, and that's how that works, and I use it a lot. It says, come up with a summary to describe an ad hoc committee to be formed by a New England town to explore master plan and capital improvement driven ideas and concepts and develop a framework to outline the scope of work and time commitment expectations. And that's what it gave me. But so what it came up with, the point is, it's a fairly decent conversation starter. And I don't know what I missed in giving it or how we can edit that. I mean, that's not unusual or atypical at all to take something that's driven by artificial intelligence and then edit it to be more.
But that's I mean, that's a great opening.
That's a great start.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to one of these other library or you go to the school and you say, this is what we're looking to do, just to communicate,
Right.
share ideas, have a cohesive plan to build.
Yeah.
maybe we should have ChatGPT agents on our boards.
That's right.
Who's to say it's that far off?
That's right.
Man, yeah. So
Do you want to start with that then? Or does that sound like
I can start with that.
Send that to me and
I'll
put it in.
send it out, and if anybody wants to tweak it, I like the time that it's going to take to make that statement. I don't think it needs to be long and
No.
drawn out.
It's
So I'll send it to you, and
Yeah.
you can, pass it around or whatever. I feel, and if you can fiddle with it so that I get it back before our Tuesday meeting, I can share that this is the general thinking and recommendation of what we go out and share on these boards and committees, and then it's just a matter of finding out the next meeting and
Right.
getting on the agenda.
well, how about subject to review and potential edit that we agree to use that?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fine.
And I'll send it to you and We'll send it to everybody. I
Yeah,
think
send it
everybody
out.
should, and then,
Give Sarah an opportunity to,
Sarah versus ChatGPT.
yes. Oh, I don't, yeah, that sounds like Godzilla versus Mothra or something.
The first chess match.
Okay. Discussion on current building codes. We talked about doing that with Kevin Bennett being a guest. So we need to, if we're gonna do that, we need to get him scheduled. And I wouldn't wanna have the conversation without.
no, I agree.
And the other one is on the zoning map and boundaries. And then the question there is whether or not we, and for me, there's either two thoughts of this. One is that if we're doing that, and we're doing that with what we have with no changes, it sounds to me like it's somebody with a fine tip pen going through and making adjustments to the map. But Scott, when I listen to you talk about this, the conversation always comes up with, should we be looking at making adjustments to what we have for the various zones? And what's churning in my head is the fact that in the state legislature right now, there are 4 different bills that are cooking that will likely make major changes to our zoning ordinance. In terms of what is allowed, not allowed, disallowed, and whether or not we'll be able to maintain what we have in place currently, in the form that it's at, and it is highly likely that no matter what happens, we're gonna have some work to do the latter part of this year to respond to the necessary changes, because some of those are currently set up such that it looks like they're gonna pass.
Give an example of a change, like that.
Yes, you can have any kind of housing anywhere and with no frontage requirements. Other than the no frontage requirements, and the setbacks can only be set back as much as adjoining properties.
And when you say no frontage requirements,
50 feet.
there's in the building code, there's some frontage is required. So,
They're overriding that.
so
They're talking about overriding everything.
Anything local.
Yeah.
So that would be what they're gonna pass, would you say?
Now, some of the requirements are stipulated on the basis that you have to have town water and town
so would
sewer. So some of those would not apply to us because of
mhm.
the fact that we don't have town water in most of the.
Is the no frontage one connected to town water or town sewer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and also the, yeah,
So that would not apply to us.
yeah. But those are the kinds of things that they're actually looking at. The one that might affect us is more specifically, and we've talked about this previously, but is what kind of housing, or what kind of housing you can build anywhere and also manufactured housing,
Mhm.
and what can be allowed or disallowed for that. And that would be not dependent on whether or not you have sewers or
Right.
water or whatever.
Yeah, I saw that one. It was basically if it has a chassis, it can be allowed. And that's, we specify if it has a chassis, like
Yeah.
it's not allowed, so. that-
Right.
So we would be obligated to whatever the state says. We can't trump some of those things for our own
Basically,
ideas.
We can be more restrictive.
Unless
Well, no, sorry.
somebody sues the state because it's in the Constitution that local governments should have the ability
Yeah,
to have their own,
determine its own needs.
determine its own needs.
Yeah.
And it's actually the state constitution. Some of these things are not constitutional if you understand them completely. But then you'd have to go through the process of someone actually going through the courts and like, we're going to have to take a look at some of those things and see how they, put them through the Jackson sieve and see what falls through and what doesn't.
And what the time frame is for implementation of any of those. I mean, I don't know if they would make it immediate.
Well, they wouldn't be immediate, but they would likely be January. So, obviously, the way our zoning ordinance is written, it's subject to whatever state requirements that override, and we have to, by law, we can't put in things that the state doesn't allow.
Right.
So, I think we're going to be busy.
Yeah, I thought most of them did have that sewer and water.
Most of them were good.
Because that's what I kept
And-
reading. I
But
was like,
we'll,
okay, that's not us.
we'll have to look, and I'm sure, the municipal associations been real good about telling us what the potentials are for those. But then trying to look at that and look at it compared to what you actually have in your zoning ordinance will require that we look at it. So I think we'll have some activity there.
Do you think it would be worth to invite Chris to one of these meetings?
Mackler?
Yeah, just to see, because I remember when he was on the board, it was always interesting because we would ask him, like, what's going on down there, what do you think is going to happen? And he would share what, and now, because I don't know if you have ever have him at any of your meetings to kind of tell you what's going on in Concord that kind of impact us.
That would be really helpful.
In the past, we've had him kind of give us some financial advice around CDs and things like that. But that was a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, no, I think it's a great idea.
Especially with all this stuff. It's like, oh no, that's never going to happen. Remember the whole short-term rental thing that was going around down there? It's like, that'll never pass, don't worry about it. And it never was. So, I'm not saying often, but.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be part of their job? To have a forum with some frequency. I mean, not monthly, but, quarterly or twice a year or something where
You could take it up
people
to
can
us.
come and listen to what the tenor of the state is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not running, but yes.
No.
He says, whoa. Maybe.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I personally think it would be a great idea. I don't know what their time commitment is and what they're allowed to do under their rules to do.
But if you're representing a group of people or a district,
Mhm.
it would be nice if there was a way of keeping the district involved
Yeah.
in what you're doing.
I mean, the feds have town halls. I mean, when their state reps to go back home, they always have town hall meetings.
Yeah.
But I would imagine the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and so he'd probably say yes to any kind of board or committee. It'd be more likely than to be proactive and ask if he could come. So I think
Yeah.
an invitation for a legislative
Yeah.
update is a great idea.
Yeah. And it might show them that we care.
Yeah, right.
Especially if we include it in the minutes that he'll probably read.
Yeah.
We can also even give him a call.
You said there were 4 bills that.
Well, there are actually about 11, but there are only about 4 that really
Concern.
could play into
Large role.
changes. The manufactured housing one, parking requirements, the building inspection process would definitely have an impact on Kevin. That's 3. There's a 4th one.
Is there an ADU one, like a 2
Yes.
ADUs?
They can be
The
separate.
ADU one that is slightly different than what we allow, and that would be one that says by right you have the ability to have not 1 but 2 ADUs on any property. assuming that you can meet other requirements for setback and water and for septic.
I want to ask, can ADUs tend to be after the fact? Can you build an ADU alongside your main, at the same time as your main? I don't see
I wouldn't,
why not.
I would expect you could, yeah.
Yeah, why wouldn't?
Why not?
I didn't think there was any reason, this was,
But, yeah, and
it never come up, so I thought I'd
Yeah,
ask.
but it's by right, and actually, the way our zoning ordinance is set up, we actually have a fairly liberal one that basically says that you can have a detached. Many towns do not allow a detached ADU. You can have an ADU, but it has to be an attached one. And so you don't have the ability to even consider that. We have that in ours. You guys who put it together back when, allowed that. And so, and also the other part of the ADU one is the size orientation, and that one is that you can't limit the size to, I think 600 square feet is the maximum amount that you could limit. Or you couldn't say to someone, well, you can't build one unless it's, if you have one for 800, you're okay, but if you have one for 500, you couldn't. You have to have a minimum 600 square feet in your prohibition. Ours is, what, 12? Or is it 1,000 or 1,200? 1,000, I think.
Everybody's got their new 2025s?
Oh, we do.
Oh,
Whoa!
I'd like one of those.
You'll have to come and get one, Sarah,
Thanks, Jim.
although it's online.
And so, yeah, whatever the HBs or SBs are that we have, specific questions about, if he's got a heads up on that, and he can come in prepared to share his thoughts, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Not exceed 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, so we're well above.
And our minimum is 350 square feet.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what they required is the minimum. Or if there was a minimum requirement. But yeah, they're pushing on something that's the, so, yeah, I think those are the four bills that were, they kind of stuck in my head. And there's a few that are out there that are not likely to pass, so, including the one to legalize marijuana.
Yeah. That's good.
So, again, so the question I have in terms of the zoning map is it, at this point, without opening up the can of worms, should we actually be having something better than what looks like a smudgy pencil on Route 16 and 16A?
Well, we can't draw a hard line, right? It's gotta be some distance from something. We
Well,
can't carve a line.
We have it
around.
defined as 500 feet from the center line of those.
Right. But how else, so far as where the boundary is, how else would we do it? I can't think of a different way that we would do it. I think to make it simple, if your property is in any way within the 500 feet, making it commercial would be the way to avoid a lot of
Hassle.
discussion and hassle and arguments.
And I think that was what Julie said that the guy was having a problem with, was we don't have it clearly defined if it's any of the property,
Right.
it's all the property.
Right.
That was his issue,
Mhm.
and that's what we've done this.
And we've had that conversation before, we just need to either decide one way or the other.
Say we said it's any parcel of the property that's within 500 feet, the whole thing is. And we put that in the zoning, that would have to, is that cleanup, or is that, has to go in front of the vote?
It would, I think would have to go
Yeah.
for both, yeah.
I mean, the biggest, I think the biggest impact would be short-term rentals. There could be some additional commercial development because of it, but there's no commercial development happening anyhow. It would allow for some degree of, increased degree of short-term rentals. You know, unlimited ones versus the 30 rental ones.
Yeah, the only commercial development that we're actually hearing about are properties that are currently commercially zoned. So,
Do you think people today that live in that area already believe that that's what they are? Do you think that's,
well, I think it depends on whether you are wanting to do a short-term rental and
because what benefit is it, if somebody doesn't want to do a short-term rental, what benefit being a commercial compared to a residential? What's the benefit to a homeowner?
It
No,
probably
right.
might be a little higher value.
But that's about it, right?
I mean, just your option to put a business on the property. When we're talking about the, that Route 16 corridor, I mean, it's just no one's going to be developing. There's lots of concern about a strip mall going in, and should we make sure that's not possible. That's not
yeah,
gonna happen.
and the one bill that is out there, there's a Senate bill that gets at that as an issue, and that Senate bill basically says that your local zoning ordinance cannot prevent any kind of development in any zone. So if you want to put an apartment building in a residential area, you can do that. And if you want to put a warehouse in a residential area, you can do that. That's what it says.
Sounds like that'll be tied up in court
Yeah,
for
yeah, we're
years.
challenging that.
And so that one's, that one still hasn't made it. The next couple of weeks, it's supposed to make it to the House for consideration, so.
I can see a modification of that being housing, because I could clearly see them saying you can put an apartment building anywhere.
Well, the intention of it is to allow for, in many zoning ordinances, if you have a commercial district, you may have a district that says you can't put an apartment building here, it just is inappropriate to do that. It's stuck among some warehouses or whatever.
Oh, so it's the opposite.
Yeah, basically you're saying, you're precluded from putting housing in this particular area, as opposed to putting a warehouse into a housing area. And that's the idea of it. I mean, the person who put it forward, for a lot of the urban areas, they have places that have been built out with warehouses that are no longer useful. Some have been torn down. You have this big area that's not being used, and there's a big housing need, and some people are saying, well, why can't we build housing here? And it's like, nope, because it's prohibited. And so this bill would address that and say, yeah, you can put housing in here. We don't have that kind of setup here in our zoning. It doesn't say that if you're in commercial, you can't build residential in the commercial district. So we don't have those prohibitions with which to be concerned. But again, they're looking at it from a state perspective, and they're looking at cities where there's actually property that's not being used for anything. I appreciate sometimes the impetus of why some of these things come forward, but they're done with the idea of looking at the problem that's in front of them, not necessarily what the impacts might be for other towns. Anyway. All right, I think that we should come up with an answer, at least to the question of what we would like to do in terms of what the zoning map and boundaries ought to look like within our existing definition. And prepare that, and it won't make any difference until it gets voted on by the next year. Or it shouldn't, but I think we should do that.
Well, I'm all in favor of saying, it's the simplest, and it'd be avoiding issues, is if any of your property is within the 500 feet. Because that's what we've been doing with the short-term rentals, kind of.
We just need to agree. Have a vote.
Can I motion to make that vote?
No, I would like to have a public hearing on that.
Oh. Okay. I want all power, I say.
I think we need to do a public hearing, as we do with most of our language changes. We can decide to do, but I think I'd like to listen and make sure that what we're considering fits with other people's view of it. At least, what do you think? And we could vote on it, but we still have to have a public hearing.
Well, we can vote on it, we're gonna do it to a public hearing. Is that all? I mean, the public hearing would just focus on that we're going to clearly define the 500 feet?
Well, I guess I would prefer to have, because you have to do all that stuff that's required, that we have our list of things,
Right, that's what
and we do that maybe a little bit later in the season.
Okay. Beside the mapping, and then, but the public hearing wouldn't deal with how we're gonna do the map.
No,
If they agree that we agree on that it's 500 feet, then we'd figure out how to do the map to
Yep.
reflect that.
yes. If we could do that with the idea in mind that Sarah, you got something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're worried about where the 500-foot line goes. It might make sense to actually look at that area and where the property lines are, and how many properties that actually get affected by it.
I have looked at it. There are only really two roads where it makes any issue at all.
Right,
And,
so that a finite number of properties,
yes,
that, to see how big of a problem it is, and what would make, you might see what would make sense if you just look at what the situation on the ground is.
all right.
Thinking,
I won't be here for the next meeting, but I will be here for the next meeting. I'm sorry. I won't be available to do any work between now and the next meeting. But what I would like to do is exactly what you describe, and maybe come up and do a line draw that's just pretty gross, and see which properties do get cut.
I can work on that between now and the next meeting. I'm here.
But literally, there's I forget if it's Old Jackson Road or Missouri Hill Road or whatever. It's in that strip on the right hand side of 16 going up. I think it's about the only place it really hits.
Yeah, I mean, I can,
There might be a couple of houses on Switchback, one or two. and what is it, Stemford Road or whatever, there may be one or two houses that are just close enough to 500 feet.
Because it's 16 and 16A.
Yeah.
The 16B?
No.
Okay.
It's a good idea, Sarah.
Get the data.
Okay. Maybe I can.
Maybe you get ChatGPT on there.
Well, they don't go out, but I could get some things and take it down. Minimum, get some large ones for us next month.
Tell them,
So,
draw me a line 500 feet on this map.
The planning board has the budget to do that, right?
Yeah, get some larger instead of 8 by 12 kind of picture.
Yeah.
Look at a larger.
We don't
picture.
have much of a budget, but we have.
Okay, 16 to 16.
We used up about half to print these.
Money well spent.
Okay.
Short-term rentals?
We only have one, and I did see that their tax card shows that they have had one since 2023. So I don't know why you would have one from 2023 if you hadn't been renting your property out until now. But other than that,
You want to just describe it?
yeah, it's the property is at 18 Dinsmore. It's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath. Sleeps 8 according to their ad, so they're fine with the rentals. And
If you're not familiar, that's the Nestle Nook, and it's
Yep.
on the right-hand side as you're going in towards.
Yeah. I know it.
And it would be it would end up being the commercial district because it's just across the way from the property's just across the way from the river. It backs up to the river.
oh, so that would be 500 feet. So that's why they have the no.
Right.
Yep, they're in the village. But the only issue is their meals and rental tax is dated May of 2023. So they've had it for 2 years. So they did not check the box, and I know you guys were talking about looking at that application, but the application, are we looking at it? I mean, I think that has to be very clear because that is probably the most missed question that people see. Because the question on number 2 is I have/have not, and it says circle only one, use the short-term rental as property as a short-term rental prior to March of 2020. Now, they may not have used it prior to 2020, but they have obviously been using it for the last couple of years without ever telling us. I don't know if that's more of a select board issue, but as far as everything else.
Again, I don't know what the select board wants to do for non-compliant properties. Where we find out after the fact, a year or 2 later.
Well,
And we had the same one with the issue with the last one
Right.
we said.
my response to this would be, it's not complete until one of those 2 things is circled.
Well, it doesn't make any difference
What's their
though
position?
for purposes of whether it's 30 rentals or not, which is why we put that in the first place. On the original application, so that they could be grandfathered, and not have the limit for 30 in the residential area, but it was not applicable in the commercial district. So that's not really, it's a moot for this particular property relative to that.
Yeah, but to me, we dealt with one application in particular that came through that had homeowners writing all over it that they thought were stipulations on how they were gonna operate their short-term rental, and that was not the case, but it is resulted in us having a conversation about the importance of these applications being completely inaccurately filled out.
And these applications are the Board of Selectmen's applications, so
Right.
it's your
Right, and I
choice
see
to
that,
make whatever changes
you know,
you wish to have.
Well, I don't need to have it changed, I just need to have it completely filled out. So number 2, I have or have not, circle only one, neither one is circled.
Mhm.
That's, may seem like a small thing, but I think that it's an example of this not being completely filled out. And I can see the way that's set up as not being all that clear. Oh,
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't
like
know I
that.
was supposed to circle one. Well, that's why we're here to help.
So,
Bold it.
we welcome that you make any
Yeah,
changes
no,
to it to fit, and
I would,
if we can, if you need us to take a look and see whether or not
No.
the changes create any issues relative to the zoning ordinance, we're happy to take a look at it.
well, when you're passing this along to the board with your comments, that would be a real helpful comment.
Okay.
That you as a board noticed, we as a board noticed that.
But the other, and maybe that's what we're getting to, is the other issue is they may have been operating as a short-term rental, regardless of the, because this is before
Yeah.
our Jim, they have been operating potentially prior to notifying us.
And the
That's a
question
select
is,
board
yeah,
issue.
Is there a penalty because of that?
Right, do they pay the fine for not registering sooner? We can make a note of that also on our comments, that we noticed that there is a potential that they, I mean, who knows? They may have gotten that and never did it. Who knows? They
Yeah.
never, they may not have rented for the last 2 years,
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah, we have no idea.
Right, but we're gonna make a comment, the fact that their meals and room tax has a date of,
So do we have a motion to accept the application with comment regarding the fact that they did not complete on the haves and have-nots, and also that there's an indication from the fact that they have a room and meals tax license, if you will, that dates back to 2023.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second.
Second?
Jim, already second, we're good. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous, we're good. Where's Dick when you need him?
No, we can't
We
leave.
can't leave until,
We're locked here until next month.
we're all sitting here. Sorry, I didn't bring my hat today.
All right,
I'll make a motion.
thanks, I appreciate that. A motion to adjourn, do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you much.
Thanks, Sarah. Do you want me to drop off a zoning thing for you, or will you stop by here again?
If it's no trouble, you can just drop my
Okay.
line on your way.
Okay, I'll drop it off the way home.
Just don't go over the Valley Cross Bridge, though.
Gotta do that. Have a good night.
Night.
Is
How are
that,
they gonna get that big piece of metal off the truck?
With the crane, of
The
course.
big
Yeah.
crane that's sitting on the other side of the bridge.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's been there for,
I think that's the reason they left that
Yeah.
crane.
Where
I
is
just
this
can't
gonna
wait till all
go
the
now?
junk's gone.
What's that?
Where is it gonna go?
Which, the truss?
Yeah, that long,
There's
That's right.
one for each side of the bridge, so there'll be,
Yeah, outside of the highway barriers that
Yeah,
are there, they have extensions.
I've seen those, yeah, that's what it's
And that's
for.
exactly where they'll be set on.
Okay.
It'll be right between, the way it's set
Yes.
up, they'll be right between, the stanchions on the, upside, and, will be right alongside the guardrail on the side where the, walkway is.
Yeah. We were wondering as we were walking by what those were gonna be used for, and it's obviously gonna be this.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a big project. What did that whole thing cost?
Ripley's, believe it or not, world's most expensive trusses, I think, is, it was just, over $1 million.
Wow.
And I think the trusses added some six-figure amount.
Yeah, it was $180,000.
The state was on the hook for 80% of that, but even the 20% that comes from our town was was a lot of money.
Yeah. Wow.
But
For basically an ornamental bridge,
an ornamental addition to that bridge.
the whole.
You do realize we got, for an investment of $5,000 when we replaced the deck on that thing, we had, and plus the town's employees putting the new deck on, we got, what is it, 5 years out of that?
Probably.
So it's like $1,000 it cost us $1,000 a year, and
Yeah.
I think if you take the whatever 2 million it's gonna cost total on this time, the cost is a lot more than $1,000 a year.
Oh, yeah.
But we're gonna have something that'll last, well, maybe another 100 years. I won't see it. We won't see it. None of us will see it. Maybe we can ask, put it in our will for our grandchildren. Check it out, will you? Check it. In order to receive these $50, you have to agree to.
Well, have a nice night, everybody.
Good night,
Thanks, everybody.
Got away with it again, David. Didn't go off.
You want to hit the switch on?
Oh, yeah. It's on the top, it's the red one, start, stop, it says